So, you've done a social media cold turkey, or you've gone down to minimal use gradually. Congratulations! Take some time to celebrate yourself. If you're watching this and you haven't done either of those two things, make sure to click the video here, which will help you go down to this minimal social media use. Now back to the winners. Stop celebrating, because there's still a lot of work left to be done. If you don't keep this up for the long term, then all that you've done so far will be for nothing. But that's exactly what this video will be about. Whether you found this adjustment period hard or easy doesn't really matter. It's what comes next that's important. Remember, there's a reason we didn't quit social media altogether. It's useful, and we want enough control to reap all the beautiful benefits without the downsides. The ultimate goal is to get enough discipline and self-awareness that social media isn't even a problem. We use it just enough and we walk away whenever we want. But if you had that kind of control, you wouldn't be watching this. Instead, we'll have to rely on a few tricks and techniques to help us stay in control until we don't need them anymore. What are these techniques? Well, I have two for you in this video, and you can use them both if you want. This is the simplest and least restrictive one, but it relies on your conscience. Every time you open Facebook or whatever media we're talking about, you need to ask yourself what your purpose is. Are you bored and looking for entertainment? Are you going to check your messages? Or is it something else? And what is it? If you define your intention every time you open the media, it'll be much easier to stick to that intention. As a bonus, it'll also make you self-aware of how and why you use the media, which might just make it easier to stay away in the first place. The second technique is a lot more limiting, but also extremely reliable. Turn social media into a resource. Now then, what does that mean? Well, normally our social media access is only limited by our time and internet, both of which we have plenty of in this modern day. If, however, you artificially limited your use, you'd be forced to make a value-based decision every time you check Facebook. Suddenly, it might not be worth it to watch YouTube in the morning, because if you spend all your time now, what will you do tonight? The obvious way of doing this is just to limit the amount of time we're allowed to spend on the platform. So if you struggle with Facebook, you could limit yourself to an hour every day. And then if you want to check Facebook after you already spent an hour on there, well, too bad, you'll just have to wait for tomorrow. For this to work, we'll need a way to track how much time we spend on each social media. Luckily for us, digital welfare is in the limelight right now. Android 10 comes with a ton of new digital health features, and most phones already track your use. However, if your phone doesn't track your use on apps, then you'll just have to install one of the thousands of available apps that do it instead. But what about computers? Of course, most of us don't just use our phones, so we'll have to track our time on our computers as well. Again, there are hundreds of available options. Just check Google for a digital welfare extension for your browser of choice and ta-da! But how much time should be allowed? Well, enough that we reap the benefits without it interfering with the rest of our lives. As a rule of thumb, make sure you give yourself a little less time than you think is necessary. The extra time pressure is going to make sure you only use the media when most important. As an alternative to measuring your use by hours, you can measure it by content consumed. It's mostly applicable to YouTube, but you can set a limit of 2 to 4 videos every day. Then it doesn't matter if it's 4 10-minute videos or 4 1-hour videos. It gives a lot more freedom to you, but it can also be abused. You're bored. All the time you used to spend on Facebook has now turned into nothingness. So what do you do instead? Well, if you thought you had a problem with social media before, then I'm guessing it's because you felt you should be spending your time on something else. But turning boredom into productive time isn't easy. Actually, it's the hardest part of being productive. So, how do we do it? Humans hate being bored. We actually hate it so much, we'd rather feel pain than be bored. It's actually pretty insane. So when you're bored, your brain is gonna go through a list of available options, starting with the easiest and ending with the hardest, and ask itself two questions. Do we want to do this? And is it allowed? If the answer to either of those two questions is no, then it moves on to the next option in the list. Where it gets weird is when it runs out of options and starts considering things that aren't desirable, like feeling pain. But that's beside the point. We have plenty of available options, we just need to make sure the right one is chosen. Say you have a report to write, and you're bored. How do you make sure you automatically go to write the report instead of cleaning the office? By making it easy. How do we do this? In two ways. Reduce time commitment or reduce overall commitment. To reduce time commitment is pretty easy, and there's a famous way of doing it. The Pomodoro technique is a method by which you work on something for 20 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. You see, working on a report for 20 minutes seems a lot more manageable than saying I'll just write it. With no defined endpoint, your brain just assumes you mean you're gonna finish it. As mentioned previously, the hardest part is getting started. Once you're actually being productive, it's usually pretty easy to stay that way. So what you'll do is commit yourself to 20 minutes. Then at the end of 20 minutes, ask yourself, do I want to continue or do I need that 5-minute break? And be honest with yourself. If you need that break, then take it. But 9 times out of 10, you'll feel fine and you can continue working for almost as long as you'd like. The second method was to just reduce overall commitments. I mean to just take the tasks and make them smaller and easier. If we stick to the report example, that means just breaking it down into different sections like introduction, conclusion, and the various body sections. That alone is going to make it a lot easier. But sometimes we find ourselves with really long sections that still seem very hard to write. Oftentimes though, we can break those down even further. For example, you could take a section and break it down into the various talking points. Then you actually write it, then you polish it, and then you check grammar. The one task has now been broken down into 4 smaller ones. Sometimes we just cannot remember all available options, so we end up skipping over important, easy tasks. Therefore, I recommend that you keep a list of all available tasks, easy and hard, on hand, so that whenever you're bored, you just check the list for something to do and choose based on your energy levels. You can keep this list on your phone or on a piece of paper. I keep mine on my whiteboard, but you can do whatever works best for you. Okay, that was a lot to take in. So let's just break it down at the end here. Firstly, turn your social media into a resource by limiting your time or content consumed. Make sure to put the limit slightly below what you feel is comfortable to make sure your brain is put into a resource management mode. And make it easy to be productive by breaking tasks down into smaller steps, committing to less time at once, and keeping a list on hand of easy and hard tasks available. In an ideal world, we'd rely on our discipline and self-awareness to manage our social media. But developing that takes time. So until then, we'll just have to rely on tricks like these. As mentioned earlier, this is one video of a 3-part series. The first video was focused on reducing your social media use. This one is focused on maintaining it for the long term and turning extra time into productive time. The last one will come up at some point in the future. If you want to make sure to watch that, then hit the subscribe button. If you found this video useful, hit the like button. And if you want to watch more of my videos, make sure to hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload. And if you're curious about or have any opinions or any questions, put it in the comments, because I love to talk about this kind of stuff. I also want to thank my family and friends. Last week I posted my 6th video on Facebook and saw an awesome, huge response. Thank you for that. And for everyone who came back for this one, thank you a million times. And remember, I upload every Thursday, so I look forward to seeing you in the next video.